I never imagined that the first time I felt truly invisible would be while carrying the most visible part of my life, my unborn daughter. I'm Camille Johnson, 35. Senior Communications Manager at Eastbrook & Miles, a PR firm based in Chicago. I've always been the type who showed up early, stayed late, and let my work speak louder than my voice ever could. And it had paid off, for a while. I'd climbed the ladder from assistant to mid-management to a seat at the executive table, or so I thought. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in January. I still remember staring at that little stick on my bathroom counter, half in awe, half in shock. My husband Troy and I had been trying for months, and when it finally happened, it felt like everything in my life was aligning. I had the career, the home, the partner, and now, the child we'd been dreaming of. I didn't tell work right away. Part of me wanted to protect the news like a secret flame, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew what would happen once it was out. Women in my industry talked about being sidelined, forgotten, or reassigned the moment they were seen as anything but fully available. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast. The day it all began was during the quarterly pitch review meeting, a big one. Every team lead presented their vision for our next high-profile campaign, a luxury real estate brand entering the U.S. market. I had been prepping for weeks, building the campaign deck from scratch, running late-night mock-ups, and even coordinating directly with the client's team in Europe. I walked into the boardroom that morning, wearing my best navy blazer and my signature nude lipstick, trying to ignore the nausea curling in my stomach. At just over 4 months pregnant, I was barely showing, but I felt everything shifting inside me, literally and figuratively. I sat down, ready to lead. Then I saw it. The screen at the front of the room flashed a campaign deck titled, Echelon Property Launch, Lead Strategist, Jason Moore. Jason. My junior. The same Jason I'd hired a year ago and mentored like a little brother. The same Jason who had spent more time flirting with the intern than contributing to the actual campaign. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were loading the wrong deck. But as the lights dimmed and the projector hummed to life, my heart sank. Jason stood up, smiling smugly, and began presenting my work. Word for word. Slide by slide. I looked at my boss, Diana, seated 2 chairs down from me. She didn't meet my eyes. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach. This was not a mistake. This was intentional. I sat frozen as Jason sailed through the pitch like he had spent hours building it. He used my research, my language, my creative, the timeline I built. He even used the tagline I had scribbled on a post-it note during a brainstorm, "Live above it all." I watched him parrot it like he had thought of it on his morning run. Nobody blinked. Not Diana. Not Marcus, the VP. Not even Denise from legal, who usually caught this kind of stuff and gave me a discreet thumbs up in meetings. When Jason finished, he received polite applause. Diana called it a strong direction. Marcus asked about next steps and resources. And I sat there, mute, like a ghost in the room. I opened my mouth to speak, but Diana interrupted. "Camille, I know you've been stretched lately," she said, eyes darting to my midsection for a fraction of a second, "and we wanted to help ease your workload." Jason stepped in to carry the torch. Ease my workload? I hadn't asked for that. No one had even discussed it with me. It wasn't support, it was theft, repackaged as concern. My face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and fury. I forced a smile, nodding tightly. I wasn't going to explode, not here. Not yet. But inside me, something cracked. A quiet voice said, "They're pushing you out already. And you're just starting to show." That afternoon, I confronted Diana in her office. I didn't need Jason to present my campaign, I said calmly, arms crossed. I was ready. You know I was. She sighed, folding her hands on her desk like a therapist about to deliver bad news. "Camille, you're incredibly talented, and we value you. But this is a high-pressure client. You've got a lot going on personally, and we thought this would be best for everyone. For everyone except me. She winced, then smiled like I was being difficult. You're about to be a mom. That's the most important job you'll ever have. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I felt like I'd been slapped. I left her office shaking. Not because I didn't love the child growing inside me, but because she'd just used that love as a weapon to justify erasing me. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became painfully clear. My emails started getting forwarded to Jason. I was removed from client calls to give you space. I stopped being CC'd on major updates. A campaign that I had nurtured like a second heartbeat was now someone else's star project, and I was being slowly edited out of the narrative. Even my usual team members started acting differently, tiptoeing, avoiding eye contact, unsure of where I stood. Like my growing belly made me some kind of HR landmine. And the worst part? I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was too emotional. Too sensitive. Too hormonal. Maybe I should just focus on the baby and be grateful they were giving me space. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say: they will take your silence and use it to write your story for you. That's when I decided I wouldn't let them. It started small. I began documenting everything: emails, Slack messages, meeting transcripts. I backed up files showing I was the original author of the campaign proposal. I collected calendar invites, timestamps, even notes from brainstorming sessions. I even took screenshots of design files that showed my name as the original creator. Then I scheduled a meeting with HR. I didn't go in angry. I went in armed. I calmly laid out the timeline, my pregnancy announcement, followed by a steady and deliberate removal from projects I led. I presented the evidence, not assumptions, not feelings. Facts. The HR rep, a woman named Terry, listened with furrowed brows and lots of quiet nods. She didn't say much, but her eyes told me she knew this wasn't just unfortunate timing. It was a pattern. A problem. I appreciate you coming forward, she said. I'll look into this. I nodded. But I knew better than to wait around for a company investigation to save me. They tried to erase my voice. So I started sharpening it instead. There's something terrifying, and strangely powerful, about feeling like you have nothing left to lose. By the time I left that HR office, something in me had changed. I wasn't the quiet, cooperative Camille anymore, the one who stayed late without recognition, who swallowed frustration with a smile, who accepted being overlooked so long as the work got done. I had spent years being the reasonable one. The woman who didn't make waves. But now? They had erased me. And when you erase a woman who's built herself from nothing, you don't leave behind silence. You leave behind something louder. Something unstoppable. I went home that night and sat in my baby's unfinished nursery, surrounded by pastel paint samples and unopened furniture boxes. My hand rested on my belly, and I thought about the kind of world I wanted to bring my daughter into. I didn't want her to grow up thinking she had to shrink herself to fit into rooms not built for her. And I damn sure didn't want her to learn that lesson by watching me cave. I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Operation Phoenix. Because I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to rise. Step 1 was simple: keep doing my job better than anyone else. Even as they stripped me of project visibility, I made myself impossible to ignore. I took initiative on smaller assignments and crushed them with the same intensity one had poured into the big campaigns. I cross-trained team members, offered data insights they didn't ask for, and published internal case studies with my name on them. Everything I did had a timestamp. Everything had proof of authorship. I wasn't just working, I was building an unshakable paper trail. And quietly, I started talking. Not gossiping. Not ranting. Strategic conversations, over coffee, in elevators, outside meetings. I began planting seeds in the minds of colleagues who'd seen what was happening but had stayed silent. I told them about my removal from the project, about how Jason was presenting work I created, about how no one, not a single person, had spoken up in that meeting. Most were shocked. Some were guilty. And one or two, like Lila from analytics and Jordan from media buying, actually got mad. "I remember you pitching that tagline in our brainstorm," Lila said. "I thought it was weird Jason brought it up later like it was his. I didn't push. I didn't beg for support. But I could feel the momentum shifting. I was no longer whispering. I was being heard." A few weeks later, a new opportunity arrived on my doorstep in the form of a client crisis. A boutique hotel chain, one of our oldest accounts, was facing a PR nightmare. A viral video showed a manager mistreating staff, and outrage was spreading fast. Our team needed to respond fast. The problem? Jason had been assigned lead on their brand retainer. And he completely froze. He fumbled the messaging. Took too long to loop in legal. Drafted a reactive statement without verifying the chain of command. The client was livid. That night, Diana called me. Her voice was tight and brittle. "Camille, would you mind stepping in to help? Just temporarily. We're in a bit of a jam." "Temporarily." I smiled. "Of course. Anything for the team." Within 24 hours, I had the damage control plan live. I crafted a 3-part public apology for the hotel's CEO, aligned it with their brand values, partnered with an employee advocacy group to sponsor retraining seminars, and turned the narrative from scandal to reform. I re-established client trust and got a trending hashtag flipped in our favor. The hotel sent a gift basket. Jason sent an email. Diana sent nothing. But I didn't need their praise. Because the moment that crisis hit the client dashboard, Terry from HR pinged me. "Can we talk?" The second meeting with HR wasn't as quiet as the first. This time, I brought documents. Proof of my authorship on multiple campaigns, including the luxury real estate project. I laid out side-by-side comparisons of my original drafts and Jason's presentations. I even showed time-stamped brainstorming notes. Then I brought up the language Diana used, how she suggested I should step back for the baby. Terry didn't take notes this time. She asked questions. Serious ones. "Were you ever consulted before Jason was assigned your role?" "No." "Were you ever offered accommodations you actually requested?" "No." "Were you ever told how long your reassignment would last?" "Not once." Terry leaned back in her chair, sighing. "You know this is a pattern we've seen before. But rarely this well documented." I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. "What happens now?" "We'll start a formal investigation," she said. "And Camille, thank you for not staying quiet." I nodded. But we both knew this wasn't over. Because companies love investigations, until they make too much noise. A week passed. Then 2. Jason's behavior started to change. He stopped making snide comments in meetings. He avoided eye contact. At one point, I caught him deleting old Slack messages after hours. I wasn't surprised. Diana, on the other hand, doubled down. She scheduled me for check-ins every other day. Nitpicked tiny things on my reports. Sent me emails with passive-aggressive comments like, "Just making sure you're not too overwhelmed, dear." It was laughable. But also pathetic. Because they were scrambling. And people were noticing. One Thursday morning, Lila messaged me, "FYI, heard Diana yelling in her office. Something about Camille's HR stunt. Keep your head up." That same day, I received a formal notice. The company was conducting an internal audit on project assignments and leadership decisions going back 6 months. Translation? My case was real. And they were scared. Then came the leak. I didn't do it. But someone inside forwarded one of my original campaign decks to the client who'd hired us for the luxury real estate project. The one Jason had led. The client emailed our department directly. "Hi, quick question. Why does this deck say it was authored by Camille Johnson last fall, yet our project lead has been Jason since January?" Cue the firestorm. Diana tried to smooth it over. Said it was a collaborative handoff. But the client wasn't buying it. They requested a meeting with me. That was the day I realized I wasn't fighting for scraps anymore. I had become the authority. In that client meeting, I was calm, direct, and professional. I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I simply answered their questions, showed the creative timeline, and reaffirmed our team's commitment to transparency. They thanked me. Then they asked, politely but firmly, that I be reinstated as the primary contact on the project. Jason wasn't on the next call. Neither was Diana. By the end of the month, the HR investigation concluded. The findings? Retaliation. Project reassignment without cause. Gender bias. Pregnancy discrimination. Diana was placed on administrative leave pending review. Jason was demoted. And me? I was promoted to Director of Strategy. The announcement was short, clinical, corporate. But I didn't need the company's applause. I had already won. Because the people who tried to silence me didn't just fail. They handed me a microphone. That weekend, I finally finished the nursery. As I folded tiny onesies and hung framed art above the crib, I felt peace settle over me. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my name. I wasn't just building a career anymore. I was building a legacy. And my daughter? She'd grow up knowing her mother never whispered her worth. She roared it. People love to cheer for the underdog until the underdog wins. Then they start to whisper. They question how you got there. They dissect your success, assuming it couldn't have come without help, without manipulation, without someone powerful pulling strings on your behalf. They used to ignore me. Now they watched me like I was dangerous. And honestly, I was. The promotion to Director of Strategy came with a new office, a pay bump, and a title that made people sit up straighter when I entered a meeting. But it also came with frost in the air, especially from people who had once considered me safe. Some congratulated me. Some avoided me. A few, like Lila and Jordan, stood by me openly. But others? They whispered behind screens and smiled in person. You know the type. The ones who say, "I'm so happy for you," but pronounce every syllable like an accusation. And then there was the anonymous email. It landed in my inbox 2 weeks after my promotion. Funny how quickly a woman rises when she cries to HR, "Hope the baby's worth it." No name. No signature. Just a fresh reminder that some people don't see your strength, they see your story as leverage. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. But I saved it. Because I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time someone tried to paint me as a problem instead of the solution. My daughter arrived on a rainy morning in May. Labor was long, 36 hours, but when I held her for the first time, all the chaos melted away. Her tiny fingers curled around mine like she'd been waiting to meet me all along. She had my nose, my husband's eyes, and a calm in her gaze that made me cry harder than I ever had. We named her Nora Grace. And she became my reason for everything. I took 12 weeks of maternity leave. A year ago, I might have fought to come back sooner, afraid I'd lose my seat at the table. But now? I'd earned it. And I wasn't going to apologize for taking the time to heal, to bond, to breathe. Still, the transition back was jarring. The company had changed. New hires, new clients, new attitudes. But the biggest shift? People now looked to me for guidance. Even the leadership team. I was no longer just a strategist. I was a voice. A presence. A threat to anyone who thought they could still gatekeep the glass ceiling. But with influence came backlash. It started small, missed invites to strategy meetings I was supposed to lead, documents accidentally left off shared drives, calendar blocks triple booked with no explanation. Subtle sabotage. Then came the memo leak. One of my internal policy proposals, aimed at formalizing pregnancy protections for creative leads, was forwarded to the entire C-suite. It was an early draft, full of blunt language and personal anecdotes I hadn't polished for review yet. I hadn't sent it. Someone else had. On purpose. That afternoon, I was called into a leadership meeting. The tone was sharp, the room tense. Camille, one VP said, "We understand your passion for reform, but this memo reads like an attack." An attack on who? I asked calmly. They paused. No one had an answer. I looked at the CEO, an older man with a tired face and folded hands. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm documenting a system that failed me. If we don't institutionalize change, we're just waiting for the next woman to be buried the way I almost was. He looked at me, then at the memo. Then nodded. The policy passed. Paid maternity leave for up to 16 weeks. Guaranteed project reinstatement. Role protection for women in client-facing leadership. Anonymous reporting pathways. It was the most progressive update our agency had adopted in a decade. And guess who sent me a text that night? Terry from HR, you just changed the game. Proud of you. But of course, not everyone celebrated. Jason, stripped of his title but still employed, was transferred to a lower-profile team. He rarely made eye contact, and when he did, it was with the forced smile of a man who hated that I had survived. Diana never returned from her leave. Rumor had it, she resigned under pressure, citing family health issues. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about power. And I had found mine. A month later, I was asked to speak at a Women in Marketing Summit. The theme? Owning your voice. I almost laughed when I saw the email. I agreed to do it. Not because I needed the stage, but because I wanted every woman sitting in that room, unsure of her place or her worth, to know this: they could burn down the old systems and build something better. When the day came, I stood behind the podium in a tailored suit, my wedding ring on one hand, Nora's baby bracelet on the other. And I told them the truth. I told them how I was nearly erased while pregnant. How they tried to gaslight me, silence me, dismiss me. How my whisper became a war cry. And how that cry became policy. A standing ovation followed. Not because I was polished. But because I was honest. I saw women crying. Nodding. Smiling with a kind of quiet relief. One woman approached me after. I thought I was crazy, she said. I thought it was just me. It never is, I told her. That night, I got home late. My husband was already asleep, Nora curled up on his chest like a dream. I watched them in the soft glow of the nightlight and felt the full weight of everything I had survived. Everything I had rebuilt. I wasn't the same Camille from a year ago. I was stronger. Louder. Sharper. Not in spite of becoming a mother. Because of it. People see the title before they see the woman. Director of Strategy. It sounds clean. Powerful. Earned. But behind that title is someone who wakes up twice a night to feed a baby, who pumps between meetings, who hides exhaustion with concealer and caffeine, and still walks into boardrooms where she's the only one who ever needed to plan her outfit around milk stains. I had won the war for respect. But the battle for balance? That was just beginning. 3 months after returning from maternity leave, I was tasked with leading our agency's most high-profile account to date, Nora Luxe, a national campaign for a luxury skincare brand looking to rebrand for younger markets. $12 million budget. 9-month rollout. All eyes on us. And they put me in charge. I should have been proud. And I was. But part of me knew this wasn't just an opportunity. It was a test. A chance for some in leadership to prove I wasn't really ready. To watch me juggle motherhood and management and quietly hope I dropped the ball. The kickoff meeting was a circus. 12 clients, 5 directors, 3 creatives, and 1 very tired me, trying to steer the vision while remembering if I'd packed enough breast milk in the office fridge. Mid-presentation, my phone buzzed. Daycare. I kept speaking. Smiled through it. But inside, panic rose like a tide. Was Nora sick? Was it an emergency? I clicked the call to voicemail and continued with the pitch like a professional. Polished. Calm. Afterward, I stepped into the hallway and called back. She had a slight fever, the daycare nurse said. We just wanted to flag it. Not an emergency. But I couldn't breathe. Because this was the impossible line women walk. Give too much to work and you're a bad mom. Miss a meeting for your child and you're unreliable. I had been balancing on a tightrope for months, and now, the wind was picking up. Over the next few weeks, pressure mounted. Late-night client calls. Back-to-back creative reviews. Nora teething at 2 a.m. I was functioning on instinct, adrenaline, and sheer willpower. And still, the doubts crept in. From others. From myself. You look tired. Are you sure you can handle this much responsibility right now? Maybe you should consider scaling back a bit. They meant well, some of them. But even kindness, when laced with condescension, feels like a cage. One morning, I arrived at work to find a sticky note on my desk. When do you sleep? You're not human. I smiled. Because they were wrong. I was very human. And still winning. Then came the firestorm. We were just 2 weeks from launching the first phase of the Nora Lux campaign when one of our creative directors, Mason, a golden boy hire from LA, completely imploded on a client call. He missed deadlines. Blew through budget approvals. Lied about metrics. And when confronted, he threw me under the bus. Camille signed off on all of this, he said. She was in every loop. That was a lie. But it was delivered with the same charm that had earned him 3 internal awards in 6 months. For a moment, I watched everyone on the call look at me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I didn't scream. Didn't fumble. I opened the call log, screen shared my email threads, and calmly laid out every approval chain. Timestamped. Documented. Verified. Silence fell across the room. Then, the Nora Lux exec cleared her throat and said, "Well, looks like you've been doing double the work to cover someone else's mess. Thank you for your clarity, Camille." Mason was placed on leave within 48 hours. But the damage was done. Not to me. To my illusion of safety. Because even with receipts, even with grace, the moment things went sideways, I was still the one expected to explain herself. That night, after Nora finally slept, I sat in the dark and stared at my laptop. Not working. Just thinking. About all the women who never get to defend themselves. Who are pushed out quietly. Who burn out because no one ever gave them the chance to breathe. And I realized something: it's not enough to survive the system. You have to change it. The next morning, I sent an email to the executive team, subject, proposal, Working Mothers Equity Program. I outlined mentorships, flex-hour tracks for returning moms, on-site daycare partnerships, and protected leadership tracks for women post-maternity. I didn't ask for approval. I demanded commitment. And this time, they didn't call me emotional or ambitious. They called me right. A week later, the CEO pulled me aside after a meeting. "I underestimated you," he said. "Not because you're a woman. Not because you're a mother. But because I thought you'd play it safe once you got what you wanted." I smiled. "I never wanted safe," I told him. "I wanted fair." He nodded slowly. "Let's build it." The Nora Lux campaign launched with a bang. Sold out products. Viral media buzz. A 22% spike in quarterly growth. And I stood at the front of that success, tired, proud, and fully present. Not just as a director. But as Camille, the woman behind the title. The mother who didn't shrink. The strategist who didn't break. The voice they couldn't silence. Power doesn't show up the way you expect it to. It's not the corner office, not the applause in the meeting. Not even the raise that finally matches your worth. Real power shows up when people start saying your name in rooms you didn't even know you were being discussed in. It was a Monday morning when I realized something had changed. I walked into the office late after a pediatrician appointment. Nora had caught a stubborn little virus, and instead of side eyes or impatient sighs, the team looked, relieved to see me. Like I was the constant. The anchor. The person who made things feel stable again. Even my assistant said softly, "People are different when you're not here." That wasn't ego talking. That was gravity. And I had become the center of it. By then, the Working Mothers Equity Program was in full swing. HR had formalized it under my leadership. We held open forums, peer mentorships, and anonymous surveys about returning to work after childbirth. Women started coming out of their shells. Not just moms, junior designers, admin assistants, analysts, women who had been quiet for too long suddenly began to speak up. About being talked over. About being skipped for promotions. About the fear of taking sick days because they might not need me after this. One woman, Eliza, told me in a whisper that she hid her miscarriage out of fear that it would make her seem emotionally unstable. I didn't have words. So I just held her hand. Because sometimes, power isn't about fixing things, it's about making space for the truth. At the next leadership retreat, our CEO asked me to present our 6-month equity results. We'd seen a 17% increase in retention for new mothers, 3 internal promotions from our pilot mentorship group, a 22% drop in HR complaints tied to gender bias. I stood at the podium, Nora's hospital bracelet tucked in my wallet, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. They knew who I was now. They knew what I stood for. And they were listening. But power, as I learned, always comes with a cost. Especially when you take up space people assumed would always belong to them. Enter Vanessa Fields, the new VP of Operations. Polished. Ivy League. Unapologetically cold. She'd been hired 2 months prior and made it clear from day one, she didn't like blurred lines. No personal baggage in the office. She called my equity program a well-meaning PR experiment. She pulled me into her office one afternoon and said, "This isn't a nonprofit, Camille. We're here to win. Not to coddle feelings." I smiled politely. But inside? Fire. Because I was winning. And I was doing it without stepping on anyone's neck. Things came to a head when one of our top junior analysts, Marissa, came to me crying. She was 6 months pregnant. Brilliant. Dedicated. And Vanessa had just told her she'd be offloaded from client work until she delivered. That wasn't company policy. It wasn't even legal. But it was a quiet push. A tactic women like Vanessa had used for years to make motherhood feel like a liability. Marissa said, "I don't want to lose my shot just because I chose to be a mom." And I knew what I had to do. I scheduled a meeting with Vanessa and our legal advisor. Pulled out emails. Policy memos. Discrimination statutes. And then, calmly, I asked, "Do we want to be the company that sidelines women for having children? Or do we want to be the company that promotes them because they bring something no one else can?" Vanessa didn't apologize. But she backed down. Marissa stayed on the account and crushed it. 2 weeks later, she was offered a senior role before maternity leave. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. Because I knew how fast the tide can turn. And because I wasn't fighting for moments anymore, I was building something bigger. A legacy. That spring, I was nominated for Industry Changemaker of the Year. It was surreal. They flew me to DC for the gala. I wore a black gown that fit like armor. My husband held my hand as I walked into the ballroom, nerves bubbling just beneath the surface. When they called my name, I froze. Not because I was shocked. But because in that moment, I remembered the boardroom where I once sat small and silent while men debated my worth. I remembered the bathroom stall I cried in when I found out I was pregnant, and feared it would ruin everything I'd built. And I remembered Nora. Her tiny fists. Her sleepy smile. The way she clutched my finger like I was the whole world. I walked on stage, accepted the award, and stood in front of a crowd of 600 people. And I said, they tried to reduce me to a condition. A liability. A pregnant woman in a man's world. But motherhood didn't make me weaker. It made me unstoppable. Because when you give life, you don't just carry a child. You carry purpose. I got a standing ovation. But it wasn't for me. It was for every woman who'd ever been told you can't. Every mother who'd been pushed out. Talked over. Left behind. They weren't clapping for the title. They were clapping for the name behind it. Camille Taylor. A name they would never forget. People like Vanessa, like my former bosses, like the boardroom of polished men who once called me a risk, they have a habit of rewriting stories. They rewrite you as the problem. The over-emotional one. The exception, never the rule, the woman who got lucky, never the one who built it brick by brick. But I didn't fight this long to be footnoted in my own narrative. They could try to write me out. I was going to write something bigger. After the award gala, the attention exploded. Articles. Podcasts. Keynote requests. A feature in Forbes Women that described me as the mother who moved a mountain. But with praise came scrutiny. Vanessa and the senior board had started questioning my visibility. Comments like, "Don't let the spotlight distract from your real work, Camille. Just be careful, attention always comes with a target. You don't want to be seen as just the mommy brand, right?" It was subtle, but sharp. They didn't want my platform. They wanted my platform quiet. I wasn't surprised. Success can be tolerated until it makes people uncomfortable. Then came the offer. An executive leadership training opportunity through a prestigious Silicon Valley venture firm. All expenses paid. Global mentorship. A pipeline to C-suite boards. But here's the catch, it required a 6-month leave from my current role. Vanessa called me into her office and said, "You should take it. It's a great stepping stone, somewhere else." And there it was. They didn't want me back. They didn't want a version of me that couldn't be controlled. I went home that night furious, not sad. Not scared. Furious. I sat on the floor while Nora played with blocks, and I thought, what if I stop asking for permission to lead, and start building a space where women don't have to choose? That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and wrote one sentence. The Collective, a leadership incubator for mothers who refuse to shrink. I didn't leave right away. I spent 3 months preparing, quietly meeting with allies inside and outside the company. Lawyers. Women in PR, HR whistleblowers. Activist investors. I gathered data, testimonies, the ignored complaints of women across the company. I didn't burn the bridge, I documented it. And the day I submitted my resignation, I attached a 30-page report. Subject line, "The real cost of silencing women." The reaction was explosive. The board launched an internal investigation. 2 senior managers were placed on leave. Vanessa resigned to explore new opportunities. And me? I walked out of that building without bitterness. Because I wasn't just leaving. I was starting. The Collective launched 6 weeks later. By mothers. For mothers. Backed by venture partners who saw that our ideas weren't a liability, they were untapped brilliance. We built virtual cohorts, mental health support, mentorship pipelines, legal education, and policy advocacy arms. Women started applying from all over the country. Nurses. Engineers. Teachers. Marketers, some fresh off maternity leave. Some still fighting just to pump in supply closets. Our tagline? You were never the problem. The system was. Let's rewrite it together. And then something happened that I didn't expect. The company I left? They reached out. New leadership. A young woman named Tasha had been promoted to senior VP, And she asked if we could partner with them to build out their new equity initiative. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think. Not because of pride, but because I wanted to be sure. Not that they deserved it, but that the next generation of women there did. Eventually, I said yes. Not because I forgave them, but because I didn't need their apology to move forward. And because rewriting a chapter isn't about revenge. It's about liberation. I still get emails every week. Camille, I heard you speak at the Women's Summit. I cried in my car afterward. Camille, I thought I was broken. Turns out I was just tired of being silenced. Camille, I finally asked for the raise. I got it. Camille, my daughter saw me come back to work after cancer. She calls me her superhero now. Those are the stories I collect now. Not accolades. Not titles. Voices. One night, I tucked Nora into bed, she was 4 now, all wild curls and bedtime protests, and she asked, "Mommy, are you the boss of your job?" I smiled and said, "Sort of." But then I added, "I'm not the boss of people, baby. I just help women remember how strong they are." She looked up, serious. Like a superhero? And I kissed her forehead. Exactly like that. I used to think power was something you climbed to. Now I know, power is remembering your voice when the world tries to mute it. Power is building doors where there were none. Power is knowing your name, and daring to write it into history. My name is Camille Taylor. And they tried to silence me. But I became the voice that destroyed them, and built a future for us all.